All right, we're online and in person. So we've got a really nice in-person audience here. And we'll also be able to share with our live streaming audience for folks who are joining us online. But thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's a very special night because we have our guest, Gabriel Feld, who's not only our guest this evening, but he's also our guest for this whole month of November as our resident artist here at the Siena Art Institute. So we're really grateful to have him as part of our community here. And our presentation this evening is a chance for us to get to know more about him and his background. And it's also a chance to reconnect since he was a guest of ours a few years back. So it's really wonderful to have him back in this context. And our talk tonight is also connecting to this larger initiative. Those of you who are in person see on your chairs the printed calendar of this We Will Survive series of talks, which tonight's event is part of, which has support from the Region of Tuscany through the Giovani C program of Toscana in Contemporanea for this year. And it's specifically exploring this idea of survival, creative survival, thinking about how artists, cultural practitioners, communities are facing the challenges that we have today and in the coming years. Certainly there's a lot of challenges that we face, and to think about how we can, of course, the impact on our daily lives, but also how we are thinking more broadly about culture, cultural diversity, communities, the work that's being done to support the survival of these creative communities and cultural organizations. And tonight's specifically focusing on the idea of the role of the artist, the creative professional. How can we keep our vision, our creativity alive in the face of challenges? So certainly being able to hear from Gabriel about the path that his career has taken him on. And also, when we were talking about this earlier, he was particularly interested in this idea of the survival of beauty, which I think is a very interesting and provocative topic. So I'm really interested to hear more about your thoughts on this. Certainly, I just would like to say how much of a privilege it is to be gathering together with you all tonight. Obviously, in a world that's facing lots of global conflicts, we're really grateful for the extreme privilege it is to be able to gather together, to be able to share and discuss arts and culture. So we really appreciate having you all with us today, and the folks who are joining us online, it's great to have you joining as well. We very much welcome your questions or comments. If you want to raise your hand and if there's a question you have, please feel free. It's meant to be a very open discussion for sharing. I'll just share a few notes about today's speaker as we get started. Gabriel Feld received his architecture diploma from the University of Buenos Aires, and he received his master's in architecture from Harvard University. He's been a professor at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and has served as the head of the architecture department and also as the chief critic of the European Honors Program in Rome. He's currently here with us being on sabbatical, which we're very grateful for. When he's based in Rhode Island, he has taught both design studio courses and lecture seminar courses dealing with urban culture. His artwork, printmaking and installation has been exhibited in Europe, across the US, and in Argentina. And his architectural practice, both in his native Argentina and in the United States, has involved residential and institutional projects, large-scale affordable housing, industrialized construction, urban design, and transportation. So without further ado, I'll turn the stage over to Gabriel Feld.
Much, Lisa, for this wonderful introduction, for the invitation. I have to say that when I got your note saying you're speaking the 12th of November, and the series is about the question of survival, I thought there are so many issues, so many challenges to our survival But my first reaction was, what about beauty? It seems to me that given the urgencies of social and environmental issues that we are facing now, beauty seems to take a back seat. And I think my first reaction was, we do that at our peril. That in fact, without beauty, we may instrumentalize those questions, those issues, and in the process, we may be lost. And so I decided that my voice here was going to be a voice for the survival of beauty. Beauty in the sense that we wake up in the morning thinking about that there is beauty in what we do and what we engage. I don't want to say much more about this, but I would be more than happy to discuss this further when we can have a dialogue at the end of the talk or whenever you feel like. But I have some more immediate things that I want to say. One of them is that I'm extraordinarily happy to be here. I was here, not physically in this building, but in the previous building that Siena Art Institute had in my previous sabbatical. And it was a pivotal moment for my work. And I'll talk about it in a moment. But this is an image of towards the, not the end, but towards the middle of my residency at that time. And Siena and you people opened a whole world for me, a world of form, color, meaning. I want, I'll come back to some of these images, but I want you to pay attention to one image on the in there, which some of you that can connect it to Porta Camoglia may see a hint of that, and I want you to keep that in mind as we go through the images. That image will come back, but not exactly that way. Also, people, some of you may recognize yourselves in this picture. Unfortunately, not Lisa, because she took the picture. But I'm very, very thankful to everybody here. I'm very thankful to Miriam and to Lisa for inviting me again and for having such a warm welcome to us. This was a special moment. This was the open studio at the end. I think we are going to have an open studio again towards the end of the month. And so again, thank you very much. The place was incredibly supportive. The people, you were incredibly wonderful and supportive, and you're being that way again. So thank you very, very much. Now, what do? I focus on two things. One is in the place, and the other one is in the material. I like this image because I can't imagine doing this without the place and without the material. I was teaching at the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou a little bit after I came here, and I was working with some of the ideas that I started in Siena, working with watercolor, a particular way of applying watercolor, and with cyanotypes, and then. Something happened. What happened? The willows began to bloom, and it was like an explosion. And I literally took pieces of the leaves and used them for the cyanotypes and play with them that way. And most of my work cannot happen in the void. They have to be in a place. In a way, I'm an architect. I think in terms of place and construction, you could say. The other thing is the hand. I try to think as little as I can. I'm happy that you laugh and instead of frown. But yeah, I try to let my hands think as much as they can. And when I need to think, I think, of course. But I believe in the ability of the hand to think about. And these are some of the first works that I did in Rome when I arrived 10 years ago. So basically, all the work that you're going to see this evening has to do with the work that I've done since I arrived to Rome, back and forth. It's not chronological. I like this image a lot. This image, it sort of makes me feel that I was taking in custody. I'll tell you the story later. But I'm a big fan of Carabinieri jokes. So I thought this was my great moment that I could be part of the joke. I'll tell you more about this. But this, I was doing lithography a little bit before I came to Siena. And the work that I do has to do with how things operate in the world. So, for example, here I was taking the stone and letting it drip and working vertically to use gravity as a way to develop form. And here you can see me at the end. Sort of, this is probably your age. I'm talking to the students here. This was the last year of architecture school, and I was working in affordable housing, in industrialized housing, and you can see me here. A lot of what I do still comes from that, but also this was me at the beginning of my undergraduate, first year, 1975, first year of undergraduate, and you can see the kind of paintings that I was literally constructing through geometry. But moving forward, this is an image of my studio, the way more or less I left it in September when I started traveling. And this is work that I've been doing for the last about 4 years with tape. Basically, adhesive tape of different colors that I work and overlay. And it really started during the pandemic. I didn't have access to the press for printing, and so I thought, what can I do? And I didn't do anything for a while. And then I started to play with tape, and then this is more or less at the height of the pandemic. I was just almost obsessively trying different things, different ways of building with the tape. I liked very, very much the tape. Because it was so easy to manipulate, again, the hands at work. Some parts are geometric, some parts are more informal as you cut the tape. And I was just trying different kinds of things. It started very innocently. These are the first two that I did. By the way, those envelopes were the envelopes where the mail-in votes came, at least in Cambridge. And I had some painter's tape, and I started to play. Again, I was really not thinking, and this thing started to appear. Maybe it was not a very auspicious beginning, but I thought, this is exciting, and I can do things, and I can, it was extremely immediate. And then I would start to develop these patterns. And one of the things that I work a lot with, and you will see in almost all the work, is the idea of layers, that you overlay things one on top of the other, and opacities and transparencies start to operate, and almost as a search for depth, you could say. And the other one is work in series. When I teach, I tell my students, anybody can do a great piece of work. It's not so difficult. The question is to have an argument that sustains an exploration. And series is not the only one, but to develop a series is one way to do that. When I teach printmaking at RISD, I ask the students, I don't care what you do. just do 3 to 5 prints that are part of one singular argument every week. At first, the students think, oh, that's the easiest thing in the world. And but actually, when we get to the middle of the semester, they realize that they've constructed a set of arguments that sustain their work. And so I work in series that have certain arguments. I'll show you one pretty soon that I'm particularly fond of. And then I keep working. Sometimes I do this folded, accordion books that are a way to explore in one thing very quickly different principles, or the same principle with different variations. I like very much variations. I like, there was this great, this great pianist, I cannot remember, Gerardo Gandini. Gerardo Gandini was, when I was a teenager, was an amazing musician that said, my two heroes are the great improvisation players of variations, Charlie Parker and Johann Sebastian Bach, he thought. And that's sort of my, you know, probably I would agree with him that, you know, the idea of variations and improvisation are at the heart of what I do, or the aspiration of what I do. I do these little booklets. I give them to friends, you know. So, anyways, these are the more recent series that I've been doing, and they sometimes change colors, sometimes they change form, sometimes they play with the layers. But fundamentally, what I do is sort of find a way of making an argument where geometry and chance play against each other and develop into, let's say, a deeper form, if you want. This one I'm particularly fond of. This is probably the last one that I did, R8. I've been more recently beginning to dance tango, and in the process, I learned about a new, more recently written tango called Felicidad, that I like very much, and I thought was an old tango, or was kind of, who knows, became a very famous tango. And then in Boston, I met the writer of this tango, a young guy by the name of Guido Jacopetti. Most of Argentinians have Italian last names. And there's a line that I like very much, which is sumergirse en alquitrán, that translates as diving into tar, which I thought was extremely relevant to our current times. And I began to do these variations, and you can see that the principles are clear and have to do with layers of color superseded by a layer of black. And actually the first 3 or 4 were very easy. They came easy. And then you say, oh, then what else can you do? No, I don't know. I'm sure this happens to you, that you say, and now what? And now what? And now what? And so I was playing with these variations, with scales, with rhythms, with different kinds of ways of making different things. And then I had a fantasy. I thought, really, these things don't make any sense if you don't hear the tango. And I was going to Buenos Aires, and I said, I'm just going to take these things with me and see if I can make a show. And then if I can go ask the composer of the tango has a duo. And I said, maybe I can ask them to come and play a few tangos, including Felicidad. So I found the gallery. There, at least in Buenos Aires, it's not very easy to find a gallery where you can play live music. There are places for live music, there are places for art, but this one happened to be one that had both things, and you can see this here. And then you can see the two musicians. The guitar player is the one that was the composer, and playing this tango. And in the process, I thought, well, the studio's open again. Now I could try screen printing, and I started to develop ways of using the tape as a way to mask the screen and develop these screen prints. And I began to find the possibilities of other techniques, in this case, printing. Here you can see the last of those screen printings. And so I became very excited with screen printing. So when I went to Buenos Aires, I worked with an amazing master screen printer, and what I did is what I typically do, which is I work with materials. So in this case, I was using paper to mask, simply the paper getting tacked to the screen with the ink, and I was ripping the paper. So what you see there are forms that result from ripping the paper. I would, before going to the studio, I would simply take pieces of paper and rip them and have them ready for printing. And then again, you can see I do more or less the same. I don't care very much about form, but I care about the form that results from material operations. So you can see that those forms are the forms that result from ripping the paper. And then layering happens. This is, again, you can see that certain things I keep doing, let's say the storyline changes, but the behavior remains the same. And you can see that there are layers and layers and layers. And I have been doing printmaking for maybe 8 years, so I have to learn. I don't have a formal education. So in the process, I came across amazing teachers, and one of them is Andrea Mocho, that you see her there. It's hard. Anybody does screen printing here? No?
I just tried different times during workshop, but not in a professional way.
Mm.
I really enjoy the process.
Yeah. I found that printmakers and print teachers can be divided into two categories. One, people that are incredibly proficient technically, and they have a very narrow view. Things have to be done in one way. And then people that are very open to different experimentations, but are not very good technically. And the beauty of Andrea is that she could do both. She's incredibly technically extraordinary and very, very open. And in fact, she kept saying, "Oh, just try this. You have to go beyond these things." And it was really a very short but very intense experience that I hope now that when I go back to Buenos Aires, I will continue. Now, let me go back to the beginning. Let me take a little break. About 10 years ago, fall of 2014, I arrived to Rome to be the studio teacher at the RISD program in Rome. And I met a lot of interesting people in Rome, among them the director of the gallery, the Temple Gallery in Rome. And she tells me, Shara Wasserman, I don't know if, have you ever crossed paths with her? No. So I just met her, we were having coffee, and she says, "Oh, you have to come to the opening of our gallery. Is very important in Rome, and you have to come to the opening of the gallery." And she says, "We have two galleries. We have the big gallery downstairs, and we have a smaller gallery upstairs that is more experimental." And she says, "And there is this fantastic show opening, I think this was Monday, on Thursday, at the lower gallery." Oh, very interesting. I'll definitely go. And I said, what about the gallery upstairs? What's happening at the gallery upstairs? She says, oh, the person that was going to do a show canceled at the last minute. So there's nothing upstairs. And she looked at me like, kind of like mischievously, says, would you like to do a show? And I had nothing. I just arrived to Rome. And yeah. No. There was one day because it had to be done by Tuesday, I don't know. I had one day. And I said, and she was totally ridiculous to ask me. And I was even more ridiculous to say yes. So sure, I'll do it. And you can see that. So I sent her this image of the poster. And I had in my mind, I always liked the idea of the centuria, the 100 soldiers, and you can tell that I like grids and these kinds of things, and I had done some foldings that I like to do foldings. I had done. I'm very good at stealing office supplies, and I remember I was at RISD and I was bored and I started to steal Post-its. And I would fold them, again, in my hands. And I said, I can do something. So I went back to the Cenci, and I went and I bought some whatever Post-its, whatever colors of Post-its I could find, and started to develop this idea of the 100 soldiers. And one of the things that was that it had always a core of 4x4 in the center that in my mind always went at the height of the head. And I said, I can start with this, but I had exactly one day. I had to go in the morning, and by the end of the day, it had to be done. And it was a pretty big gallery. So I remember I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask a couple of students from RISD and a couple of students from Temple to work with me. And I remember I went there and I found this statue, and I said, oh, I'll do a small, quick thing so to teach the students how to work with these things. And I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to, you see, this is 2x2 because it's a smaller head, and is a 5x5 instead of a 10x10. And that way I could explain to the students how to work. And then I said, and now, each of you put your head, do the 4x4 and then play. Do whatever you want. I don't care, this is, and so I had them each, you can see, each of them had the 4x4 on their heads, and there were some more. And then we had enough time. Each of them did one, and then I was playing on the other wall, and we did this show, and it was quite fun. And it was the beginning of, someday I became the artist of the Post-its. And then I started to develop this, and I was very interested in the construction, the Roman constructions, and you can see that this is what some of you probably know as opus reticulatum. And I was playing with this ways, and then I had a studio. I mean, I was an architect. I didn't know that artists had studios, but because I was a teacher in an art school, I had a studio. So I started to play with these things. And this is one of the most interesting things, because this is not in Rome. This is in Providence. I was invited to the faculty biennial, and I said, but I'm in Rome and I have to do this. So with two of the students, we did a study in Rome, and when they went back to Providence, they built it. I wasn't there. They put it together, and you can see if you look carefully. All of these things are the measure of one of the students. The top is the raised hand, the head you can see again, the knee. I mean, there is this whole thing. And then the Triennale came. They invited me to do something at the Triennale, and you can see that this guy is laughing. I thought it played very, very well. So you can see it was a series of installations in a corridor, and And you can see me here doing it. And you can see again the question of the layering is an important one. And there were several, in this case, instead of the head being a square, the head was the T of the Triennale. And you can see here more or less, they asked me, when they invited me, they said, oh, we love what you're going to do. We selected this gallery for you. And I said, no, I don't want a gallery. I don't want a gallery. I want a place where people can see this as they move around in a state of distraction. And they thought this didn't make any sense to them. And so I went there. I took a train from Rome to Milano. And I said, let me find the right place. And nothing, they said, no, you cannot do this here. You cannot do this here. And I found the place that was innocent enough, the stairs, the entrance to an auditorium, and say, oh, yeah, you can do it. We don't care. Nobody's going to use this place. You don't care. Nobody cares. And then it turned out that it was the entrance to all the ceremony of the openings. And I couldn't be at the entrance because the Carabinieri were not the ones guarding, were these people with big things guarding, and artists were not allowed, only dignitaries and all of that. So this is what happened. The next morning, I saw that the Corriere della Sera, they had made photographs of all the dignitaries. So you can see the Sindaco, you can see the governor of there, and even the Archbishop was there. They were all there. So when all of these people were left, the Carabinieri in Regalia had already took their hats off and all that. But when they realized that I was the one that had done that, they put it back again and they let me do this photograph that I thought was very, very nice. So when you hear me telling jokes about Carabinieri, it's with all respect. So I'm going to finish with this, but when I came back to Providence, they said, oh, you've been doing all the things that we love. And the office of the international office said, we want one of those posted things. And I said, well, I've done enough posted things. But what had happened is when I was in Rome, the doorman of the Cenci, Enrico, an old man, Enrico, one day comes with this big package. I said, professore, lei piace fare questa cosa con la carta? Ho questa cosa che non so che fare, la vuole? Do you, this guy says, you like to play with paper. I have this package that I don't know what it is. And it was a package with 1,000 postcards from the trash company in Rome, which I thought they are making trash. And so I did this thing, this whole thing is playing with these cards. And it's something that, then I developed. When I was here, I thought I could do one for you, but it never prospered. You can probably recognize these things that I stole from some package that was there. You probably know that they were missing. I didn't take a lot of them. Anyways, so some of these things go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. And one thing that happened is, I don't know, do you know how many million boxes of corrugated cardboard are delivered every day? I thought there is this enormous amount of cardboard that is fantastic. There are a few things that I like a lot, like I love gummy bears and related to this, but I like corrugated cardboard. Corrugated cardboard is one of my absolute favorite materials. And then suddenly there is tons. Have you seen here when you go out? Like the thing is overflowing. Some of it I took to my studio now, but it's overflowing. So I started to play with this, and you can see this is my studio, and I discovered this corrugated cardboard. And the thing about these boxes is that there is a lot of trash. I mean, parts that don't work, and it's very thin. So I try to it's very flimsy. So I tried to make it rigid and develop them into structures. And you can see here, these were the beginning of the structures that I was developing. And then one day there were these high school students that wanted to do something at RISD, and I said, okay, come and we will work together. And so I was able to do these very large structures with a team of something like 8 high school students that then again, they learn how to do these things, and I would set them. I think that the tallest tower is like 20 feet tall. So it was to see that with this cardboard, you could make very tall and pretty sturdy structures. And this is my studio. Then when the people at RISD realized I needed cardboard, the guy at the RISD store said, oh, I can give you all the cardboard you need. And you can see here, I had a pile that I literally never run out of. So I could do all these things. And then a colleague of mine, a textile designer, said, would you do some of these structures for my shows? And I said, sure, I'll do them. And so here you can see them in the shows. Children love them. They were very curious. What are these things? And this is another show that he did where I did these things that could be combined in different ways.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And here you can see this tower that I did for the RISD Museum, another show. And the interesting thing is then they asked me to do a structure for another show, and I didn't have the time to do them. They don't take a lot of time, but they take a little bit of time. And so all that I did is I took it inside out. So you can see that the tower that you see on the right is simply this tower inside out. So here you can see the studio where I was taking on this question of the little Babel, the tower that deals with language, and doing a series of prints. And what I want to run very quickly here is the way I do prints. Most of my work is really prints. You can see here a show that I did in a small town in France with this monotypes. And this is what I like is these are the first 6 prints I did in my entire life. On the right, you see the Bendini press that I felt madly in love. And I look at them and they are horrible, these prints. They are simply elastichetti. They are rubber bands that I was using. And I thought, this is horrible, but I love to do this. So I just kept insisting. And, again, for me, what was important was the materials, how I could understand. When I think of printmaking, I think of the bed of the press as a construction site, and literally that's what I do. Here you can see how I build the plates and how they result. I'm very, very fond of this material that you can see, the tubes, because they deform in the press. So the form is the result of the pressure of the press. And then I came back to Providence and I started with very simple things like string. Again, the form is not something that I decide. It's what the natural, let's say, the natural bent of the string. This was very funny. The fall came, and so there were all these materials in the street that I thought this would make great prints. And I remember I was collecting these things in the street and with a bag. And one of the vice presidents for finances at RISD looked at me and says, Professor Feld? And I thought, yeah. And I was collecting, looked like I was collecting, cigarette butts or something like that. And I explained to him, it wasn't very convincing, that these things turn into prints. And so then, a few months later, I went to his office with a little print, and I said, "This is what happens with these things." I'm not going to go in details here, but again, this is a plate that I found that was in the trash, and I thought, "Oh, I like this form," and I started to work with it. And I could do a whole talk about the prints, but I'm just going to show you a few things working with chincolé paper, color paper. Then these things happen that the stories start to cross. Like, so for example, here you can see that this piece at the Biblioteca Angelica in Rome is really a cross between printmaking and the folding of the Post-its. So these things start to sort of, you could say, thicken the plot. Here you can see I was playing with ghosts and reverse ghosts. I could explain that later if you're interested. But again, this is when in the fall you start to have all the husks of the corn, and I started to play with the husks of the corn. I like very much the thin threads because the prints show them very, very well. And then I started to mix the prints with other kinds of monotype. This is in every January I go to Kuwait to teach printmaking, and then I also do some of my prints. You can see them here. And, but I also do serious things, like I would go to Barga. For those of you that don't know, Barga is as far north as you can stay in Tuscany. And, you can go and stay in Tuscany. It's a small town, and I learned to do this multi-plate color etchings. And you can see at first year, I was simply trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And I was taught by Nick Krashina, an incredible master printer that is the kind that knows everything there is to know about intaglio, but you have to do it his way. I remember he would teach me how to clean the bevels of the plates. The first week, I think I cried because I couldn't, because you do 4 or 5 layers. One of them is bound to be badly done, but it was wonderful. And but he had to do things had to be done his way. And at first, I would do this kinds of things. Here you can see all these permutations using the plates. The second year, I started to enjoy doing additions, and you can see here. So this kinds of additions, and then I started to discover that I could play with the plates and do my variations and do my series, not only changing colors, changing the order of the plates, but also using plates from one to the other. Again, the story that one comes into the other. And then the third year, I got really, really serious, and I told Nick, this year, this is my third year. I want to do things my way. And that meant that I wanted to dip things in the acid and work directly on the plate. And he said, okay, we will do that, but we will do it outside and under my present supervision. So I couldn't do it. So, but I started to sort of put things in the acid and put in the plate directly, and then do these variations that were much more careful and methodical, if you want. Just briefly, lithography. I was super excited working with this until I realized that once you seal it, you cannot add. So, what do you mean you cannot add? No, you cannot. You can, but again, one of these people that really was very good at the technical stuff. You don't want to add, and I said, "Can you subtract?" He said, "Sure, you can," and so I started to oversaturate the stones and then start to remove things. So I would do 2 or 3 short, brief editions where I would start very, very dark, you see on the left, and then start removing. And then we come to Siena, and you can see now, let's see, you can see how Porta Camoglia, I don't know if you can see, it is in the same place. Yeah, you can see Porta Camoglia was upside down, and there were all these other layers that started to happen in there. And I started with very, very simple. I didn't have a press, so I developed my own way of doing things, and text became very important. Some of you may recognize that little square on the left. These things that start to percolate. How many of you, raise your hands if you, that square of writing, you can recognize it? Okay, if not, you should go tomorrow morning and see it on the side of the cathedral, one of the most amazing palindromes in the history. And then you can see here that going to the Pinacoteca, the colors, these are colors that I would never use in my life. Gold, or this mixture of earth colors and stronger colors, but they started to happen, and here you can see the layers and how they started to play. Very quickly after that, I went to Hangzhou to teach, and they gave me a very small studio, and then this is what happened when the willows started to bloom. And this is more recently. We're coming to the end of this presentation. I was in Sicily. I was in a small town in Tusa. And again, at this point, I had been in Berlin and in Warsaw, where I saw graffiti that I loved, and I wanted to try my hand at graffiti. And again, what you could call it the intelligence of the hand. And I began to do this abstract constructions using, again, layers of graffiti. And then I fell in love with the Fichi d'India. And then somehow this abstract things turned into Fichi d'India and more Fichi d'India. And then this was the time of the raccolta of the olives. And so I began to draw olives. And then the wind came, and I said, can I draw the wind? And I said, well, maybe I can draw the wind. And this is my studio, around 10 a.m. this morning. And you can see that I couldn't resist taking some of the cardboard at the beginning to do something. So this is what I'm doing now. And you're welcome to come anytime. The door is open. Feel free to come and see what I'm up to. We will see what it is. Again, sort of playing, I call this teatrini cinese, and this thing started to populate things. So this is how I wanted to finish the lecture. I think that not only beauty is undervalued, but humor is undervalued, and I remember. I think it just literally a roll of toilet paper fell, and I said, I can do something with this, and I began to do this toilet paper drawings. But no, I'm not going to finish with this, because as much as I love humor, there is something a little bit more serious that I wanted to talk about. I go to the CAA, the China Academy of Art, every few years. And about 10 years ago, before going to Rome, I went, and there were these piles and piles of tiles from demolished rural towns. They hadn't figured out yet that they were good, and now they preserved them. But at that point, they were demolishing it. And the dean of the school would simply bring them to the campus and, did amazing things. but they were there and I wanted to play with them. And so I would just, you can see this is before the Post-its, but you could almost imagine Post-its with tiles, and I would just put them, make photographs, and put them back. But at the same time, I was working on a project for a school in the Sichuan province that had been devastated by an earthquake, and I remember going to see the site. And the destruction was kind of wrenching. Had been a very serious earthquake. This was a city of I don't know, like 70,000 inhabitants that had been completely destroyed. You can see the destruction there. But one thing you can see is that I remember you can see piles. There were piles of rubble, but then you see that. And I remember seeing it, and it made no sense to me until I saw this man. And you can see that in defiance of hopelessness, this man was cleaning brick by brick so the brick could be used to rebuild. And to me, this is the notion that we will survive if we think that we can build and we think that we can rebuild in spite of all the horrible things that surround us. To me, this man is the poster image of hope. Thank you.
Thank you for, I really appreciate your non-chronological trip through the different bodies of work and how they're thematically interconnected, but also distinct. It's very, I really appreciate the way you put this together. We have a few questions that come from our online viewers, but I don't know if there are any questions off the bat from some of our in-person audience. Or...
Yes, I'd like to know what has become of those cardboard constructions, those towers of Babel. Where are they now?
Except for the one that is upstairs, they're all in the trash. Okay. I mean, like, this is a good question because, well, hopefully they are in the memories of the people that saw them. Okay. Can I change my answer? They are in the memory of the people that saw them, that experienced them. I'm not sure what can I do good for the environment, but at least I gave this material one more life.
There's another question on that.
Yeah. My question would be if one of these two, if you have already done or would be interested in transforming one of the 2D panels back to architecture. And some I think you already did it when it's about shop design or something like that. But yeah, bringing like you talked about doing two-dimensional stuff without thinking about it, just bring the hand, then bringing it back to like a three-dimensional architecture design.
I love that question. I would be very curious. It would be a longer conversation, but I would like to see what you see as a possibility for architecture. I think would be a very good challenge, a fascinating challenge. I teach my architecture studios that way, so I haven't done it myself. I haven't built anything beyond the scale of this shows. But in the way I teach, I do that. I thought I was going to add one part of the talk about teaching, but was just simply too much. But I've done a number of projects with students that start with these kinds of constructions and then develop into more complex architecture. Yeah, it's a wonderful challenge.
So, I was interested in the different practice languages. That I was interested in So you are an architect, and normally as an architect you have control, right, on what you do. While on prints, you have to lose control, right? I don't know. You can have a certain kind of control of what you do. So I was interested in these two different sides. Use
Let me,
of you.
yeah. Let me see if I can answer that question. The question is, where do you control from? This is not whether you have control or you don't have control, but where is the energy coming from? I'll go very, very far and then I'll come back. In tango, there is something called voleo, which means that the leg goes out and back. There is a better example. And I always love when you are dancing with your partner and you make a move and the leg goes out as part of an energy. And I dislike very much when you lead a voleo and you see that the movement doesn't come from the energy, comes from, oh, he's telling me to make a voleo, so ping, happens very quickly. So is the difference, does that make any sense, the idea that there is an energy that comes from far away, from deep, as opposed to light? There is an architecture that comes from that kind of very tight control. I don't like that very much. Do you know an architect by the name of Antonio Gaudí? Okay, Gaudí doesn't draw. He does not draw. He draws, but it's not important. What is important is he makes this models suspended and then turns them upside down. So the forms are the result of strings or small chains with weights. So the control, or what you're calling control, but I would call the energy, comes from a very deep way of operating with materials, as opposed to this. Is the difference between this and this. And the example of Gaudí is one where the form is exactly the way the material would behave if you hang it and then you turn it upside down. So it's incredibly clear structurally, it's incredibly precise formally, and the energy comes deep. Does that answers a little bit? So
we did an online question that came in from Jeff, who's joining us online. He's talking about the title of the Survival of Beauty, which calls to mind Dostoevsky's famous maxim, which beauty will save the world. But since then, the notion of beauty has come under frequent attack.
Yeah.
And he says, this evening you made the fantastic remark, without beauty, we are lost. I don't know if you had something further you want to mention in terms of that idea of the importance of beauty also in today's reality.
Well, yeah, I think, thank you, Jeff. I don't know where you are, but thank you very much for this. I borrowed the phrase from a great dancer and choreographer, Pina Bausch, that says, dance, dance, otherwise we're lost. And yes, we are at a time in which beauty has taken a back seat to other urgencies. I don't have much profound thoughts about that, other than without beauty, ugliness takes over.
And there was another online question from Fabian, who says, hello from Buenos Aires. Regarding beauty, is there a link between your first works with your geometric art and what you're doing today. Meaning if the past art was more circle and not square oriented, but also moreover the idea of this enduring connection of beauties of surviving in these different bodies of work.
Well, this guy knows me quite a bit. He's my brother. So, back from Buenos Aires. But he's pointing at something very, very important. That is, I've spent the last, I don't know, 20 years or so fighting perfection. Like, one of the reasons why I'm coming back to materials is to let the materials do what they want to do. To let, again, your question about control. To not think about control, but to think about energy. To not think about the head, but to think about the hand, which is, for example, when I started to do the tapes, was quite liberating because the form was very precise. Like, do you have a piece of paper? Just the thinnest piece of paper.
A little bit thick. Let's see.
Yeah. Can I
Or we're underneath the paper.
yeah. Let me show you something. See this? This is a line. I didn't have to draw it. It's there. It's perfect. But this is also perfect form. Right? This is a perfect form. And I could say, okay, I can do a series now with this, which is this perfect form? Is a form that is more open, form that is more closed, is a form that is twisted, the form. When I discovered that I didn't have to draw every stupid circle to make something, it was liberating. But it's hard. It's hard because, put that there and say, oh yeah, very interesting. So, but it is looking for that deep energy, that I don't know. We can talk more with my brother.
There's no other questions from our in-person audience. We can, of course, continue the conversation over some snacks and wine also. But also thanks to our online audience for joining us and for your questions. But
certainly do join us again the same time next week. Through the end of the month, we have this ongoing series of Tuesday talks. So we hope you all can join us for them. And of course, we have Gabriel Feld with us for the entire month of November. So we're really looking forward to having him as part of our community here also in the coming weeks. So,